With the Ukraine war becoming more and more intense, and Russian nuclear warfare becoming an even bigger threat, Europe aims to rearm itself in a large and possibly nuclear way. With Poland the next in line if Ukraine falls, Trump's U.S. nukes might be the only deterrent preventing Russia from invading Europe. But he is not the only actor in this regard. Just recently, French President Emmanuel Macron has hinted at sending French nuclear warheads to Poland. This is welcomed by Prime Minister Donald Tusk and could secure the future of NATO. But will the U.S. take this unprecedented move? What does Russia have to say about it? And can anything be done to prevent an all-out war? Today, we unravel some of these questions. Despite Poland not having any nuclear weapons or capabilities at the moment, this was not always the case. In fact, Poland used to form part of the Eastern Bloc nations. While operating under the influence of the Soviets, Poland had various nuclear weapons stationed within its territories. This was mainly Russian nuclear arms, but posed a threat to the West. However, Poland denounced communism in the early 1990s, which meant that it no longer accepted being ruled by the Soviet Union. It was after changing to a democracy that these nukes mysteriously disappeared back into the hands of the Soviet Union. Since the 1990s, Poland has not been known to hold any form of nuclear weapons and greatly relies on its stockpiles of conventional weapons, many of which have come from the United States. However, the situation in Ukraine might become more and more dire, especially with deliberations on a ceasefire ongoing. Many Western experts also believe that should Ukraine fall, it will be Poland who is next on the chopping block, and with no one truly understanding how the United States will react, Poland might need to develop a deterrence of their own. With this decision made by both Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and its president, Andrzej Duda, it seems like having nuclear weapons in Poland is a reality the world will eventually need to deal with. Poland has two main options for getting these nukes. First of all, Poland might choose to develop its own set of nuclear weapons. However, this takes years of planning and could take decades more to enact. The problem is that Poland might not have decades to finally develop its own deterrence program. This leaves option 2, which involves possibly convincing other Western allies to station some of its nuclear weapons in the country. This move is much easier and will also ensure almost immediate protection from Russia. Unfortunately, finding countries willing to do this might not be possible, especially since many in the West are trying to avoid the possibility of a nuclear war taking place. But one of the first to actually introduce this idea was none other than French President Emmanuel Macron. Make sure to smash that subscribe button to ensure you get your daily military report. On March 6, 2025, French President Emmanuel Macron went on record to talk about the possibility of Europe using the French nuclear deterrence as a way of discouraging Russia's aggression. The move was largely praised in the Baltic nations, but also welcomed by Duda himself. Russia was not as keen, labeling the move extremely confrontational, which could indicate its willingness to go to war to prevent this from happening. According to recent estimates, France has about 290 nuclear weapons. This is the second largest stockpile in NATO, only trailing the United States. France used to have 3 methods of delivering nuclear warheads. Unfortunately, the French disposed of the first, which used to be land-based. The IRBM base Ariane 200 Apt Saint-Christol was the largest in its arsenal, with shorter missiles like the Pluton and Hades being disbanded. Nowadays, France relies heavily on its air-based nuclear weapons. First is the 54 ASMPA medium-range air-to-ground missiles with the TNA, airborne nuclear warhead, which is often deployed on the new Dassault Rafale B. This new 4.5 generation fighter had replaced the previous Dassault Mirage 2000N. The aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle is largely responsible for carrying the Dassault Rafale M, which is a naval version operated on the aircraft carrier. These aircraft can comfortably carry its ordnance, which should be enough to deliver an absolutely devastating strike on its opponents. The second method of delivering this ordnance is via the 6 nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, SSBNs. However, France only operates 4 Triomphant-class submarines at the time of this video. The French Navy deployed one of these to always lurk beneath the waves. 2 more are always on standby, with the 4th actively remaining in service. However, this changed in 2022, when the French Navy deployed a second at the same time Russia launched its needless invasion of Ukraine. Perhaps this was a coincidence? Nevertheless, each of these submarines is armed with 16 M51 SLBMs. This means that a single French nuclear submarine has enough firepower to destroy Europe if it needs to. By counting all these numbers, we find that at any time, France has around 118 nuclear warheads ready to be deployed, which leaves more than 50% of its remaining nuclear weapons just on standby. France could theoretically use these as a way of creating a nuclear umbrella that would possibly include Poland. For now, Poland operates the F-16, with about 36 of the F-16C variants being used as a multi-role fighter. This is backed up by 6 F-35 Lightning II aircraft, which should have the capability of actually carrying these nuclear warheads. They will need to be reconfigured, or the Polish will need to consider buying the Dassault Rafale B. Moreover, Poland doesn't have any nuclear submarines known to the world, and this puts them at quite a bit of a disadvantage when it comes to possibly launching these warheads. However, using US military equipment and having its military set up in a way that is already friendly to the US, it might make more sense to perhaps convince President Trump to station nuclear weapons in the country. Exactly how many nuclear weapons the United States has is often debated. Recent reports suggest that the number is likely to be around 3,700 nuclear warheads, which should make sense that the United States has a few more to spare. In fact, the US nuclear umbrella already extends to Europe and many NATO countries. While we are not exactly sure which countries have these nuclear weapons, it is suspected that Italy, Belgium, Germany, Turkey, and possibly even the Netherlands currently have access to US nuclear weapons. With so many unique diversions, including nuclear bombs, ICBMs, and SLBMs available to the United States, it is not worth having an in-depth look at each of them. However, the bomb variation of these warheads is stationed mostly in Europe and would need a good aircraft to transport them if they need to be deployed. This is generally done using actual bombers, who can carry such large orders. But there are also quite a few logistical issues as to why it would not make sense for the United States to send some of its bombs to Poland. To deliver a nuclear bomb, a bomber, or large aircraft is needed. Since these bombs are extremely heavy, it means the aircraft burns through quite a lot of fuel en route to its destination. This often requires the use of tanker aircraft, like what Israel had used in their 2024 direct strikes on Iran. Poland doesn't have these large tankers and would need to borrow or even develop some of their own. This means that despite the nuclear weapons being sent to Warsaw, they will still need NATO assistance when it comes to deploying them. A problem Poland will not have when using the smaller and more strategic French warheads. This creates a massive risk and logistical issue if Poland eventually needs to deploy them. With the assistance of Western counterparts, who might now also be dragged into this situation. So, having US nuclear weapons in Poland might simply not make sense. And this has led to a lot of debate in the country itself. Prime Minister Donald Tusk is pushing for the United States to add Poland to its nuclear umbrella, whereas President Andrzej Duda prefers the French military intervention. Now this is once again just politics talking. Both Tusk and Duda represent rival government parties. Tusk slides more to the left with the Civic platform, whereas Duda is part of the right-leaning PIS. Nevertheless, both of them are advocating for the same thing, and this is that Poland needs to have nuclear protection if they are to potentially avert a Russian invasion. But will it work? Ukraine used to be a part of the Soviet Union from 1922 till its fall in 1991. During this time, Russia had stationed various nuclear weapons in the country. However, Ukraine was forced to give up its arsenal to Russia following deliberation and a deal in the mid-1990s. Under the deal, Ukraine was given securities from both the United States and Russia. But this only lasted about 20 years, before Russia unceremoniously invaded Crimea, which used to be part of Ukraine's sovereign territory. Following the Minsk agreements, Russia once again offered securities to Ukraine, and a ceasefire was called. However, President Volodymyr Zelensky claims that President Putin has violated this agreement no less than 25 times in the 8 years leading up to the full-scale invasion in 2022. Perhaps, if Ukraine had a few nuclear weapons at its disposal, Russia might have thought twice before making this move, which would have served as nuclear deterrence. Moreover, recent history has proven to us that nuclear deterrence is a real thing and not just a word thrown around. We only need to look at North Korea. It was first revealed in 2002 that North Korea had some form of nuclear weapons. They only did their first modern test in 2006, but at that time, the United States already expected that North Korea might have nuclear weapons. Since this admission, the world has ridiculed Pyongyang. However, the North Koreans, under the leadership of their supreme leader Kim Jong-un, have continued violating various international agreements. The West is yet to respond to any of these in earnest. The main reason for this lack of action is the fear of North Korea actually setting off one of these weapons. It currently has the capacity to not only strike its southern neighbors in Seoul, but could reach as far as Tokyo in Japan. This has naturally created quite a large threat to the world, in which North Korea is now the one calling the shots. But what it proves is the power of nuclear deterrence. Even the biggest nations in the world fear what Kim Jong-un is willing to do when pushed into a corner, and this is why nothing more than a few strong words are often used when North Korea pursues its nuclear endeavors. It also makes a very strong argument that had Ukraine been under the nuclear umbrella of its Western allies, the war would have been averted. At least, that is what Donald Tusk believes to be the truth about the situation. But there is even more motivation for Poland to request these weapons. Poland currently borders 7 other countries, but it is only 3 that currently pose a threat. To the east, the country borders both Belarus and Russia, while being directly on the western border of Ukraine. The Polish nation has even more reason to make these requests to its NATO allies, especially following the November 2022 explosion within its own borders. It was revealed that the explosion emanated from some kind of military weapon, but Russia claims that it was merely shrapnel from a Russian weapon that had already been shot down. Nevertheless, it does prove that Poland might need nuclear weapons. Let's say, for instance, the next one lands in Poland again. The country will not have anything noteworthy to retaliate with, and this will again show the country as being weak in the eyes of Russian President Vladimir Putin. So, the question remains of whether or not anyone is willing to send Ukraine nukes. As speculative as this might be, there is an actual possibility that Poland could receive nuclear weapons. However, this will be more than likely a European endeavor, with the United States currently not willing to continue assisting various countries. One thing is for sure, and that is the fact that the United States currently has a large contingent of troops that is stationed in Poland. Many other NATO countries also have a couple of troops in the vicinity, and this does present a natural deterrence. With French President Macron publicly talking about a nuclear umbrella for Europe, it is very possible that Poland might receive some of the aerial nuclear weapons. But this again presents the challenge of mounting them. As mentioned earlier, Poland does not have the Dassault Rafale or any variation thereof in their fleet of military aircraft. But what is often forgotten about is NATO Article 5, which states that an attack on one is an attack on all. This means that should Poland ever get invaded by Russia, the NATO countries will naturally be forced to respond. This does include the United States, but relying on the Trump administration has also become quite hard for Europe. One guarantee is the fact that Europe will almost certainly stand up for Poland, which again ensures that the country has some form of nuclear backing. However, the current progress made in discussions between Kyiv, Moscow, and Washington means that this war might be ending abruptly. If it does end, and Ukraine receives various security guarantees, it will provide a natural buffer for Poland to the east. So, how will Russia react? First of all, Russia immediately reacted by calling the move extremely confrontational. Should more nuclear weapons be spread across Europe, it puts Russia at a massive disadvantage. This would almost certainly lead to an escalation in the current Ukraine situation. In fact, Russia would use this as a way of not agreeing to a deal. Moreover, Russia might also see this as an aggressive move, since many of these countries were once part of the Soviet Union, all forming the Iron Curtain that naturally protected the Soviets from Western aggression. Another crucial element to this discussion is President Donald Trump. Trump is currently cozying up to President Putin, or at least, he is trying to make deals that could bring Russia back into the G8, now G7. If Trump does not want to antagonize Russia further, he might refuse to assist in protecting Poland. He could use the US influence in countries like NATO to perhaps even dissuade France from sending nuclear weapons to member states. However, it remains to be seen whether Donald Trump is merely seeking a peace prize in minerals, and he is only using diplomacy as a way of getting Putin to agree to these deals. But judging from Democrat rhetoric out of Washington, they believe that President Trump is trying to align himself with Russia, something the US leader has denied, saying he is acting in the best interest of the world. So, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that Europe is rearming itself and completely fears potential Russian aggression in the future. However, not all stakeholders are on board, and many of these countries, who don't agree, have a lot of influence in NATO itself. If you believe Poland should get nuclear weapons, let us know in the comments below. Make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel for your military report.